What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing our Week 9 preview for the 2020 NFL season. So the first thing I want to address here is the Thursday night game between the Packers and the Niners. That was... what an ass whooping. The Packers were just steamrolling over the Niners the whole time. Devontae Adams popped off. Obviously Aaron Rodgers popped off. It's just a great game all around for the Packers. The Niners just a shell of what they were last year, but a lot of that has to do with injuries. And, there's only a few guys that are playing to form, like Fred Warner. It just kind of sucks. I feel for them. I feel for Niners fans, especially. But, the Packers are on a roll anyway, so I kind of expected them to get destroyed anyway. So there's that. And so the next thing I want to get into before we get into the games is to talk about the teams who are on bye weeks this week. And so they are the Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Browns, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the first game is between the Broncos and the Falcons. This is a pretty unimpressive one. These are two teams that are in the bottom portion of the league in terms of, potential for this year. I think I have Denver taking the win here because they were able to squeeze out a win over the Patriots a couple weeks ago. And I just think that the Falcons have not showed that much promise. So I think there's not a whole lot to say about this game. It's not very interesting. So I'm going to just go with the Broncos here. So the next game is the Seahawks at the Bills, which is the game you're seeing in the gameplay here. This is, I would say, easily the most interesting matchup this week, with the exception of the Saints and the Buccaneers, which we'll get into later. But the Bills and the Seahawks are two very good teams. I'm not sure how to predict this one because, the Seahawks are clearly on a roll. Russell Wilson's still the front runner for MVP in my opinion. But the Bills are not far behind. They're still a really good team. And I think they're in just a little bit of a bad stretch. Josh Allen is not quite as good as he was in the first couple games of the season. But we'll have to see how they play here. But I think in the end, I'm going to go with Seattle taking the win. Buffalo is still a top AFC contender. I still think they're going to win their division easily. It's just the Seahawks are a tough roadblock to go past, so I just don't think they're going to do that here. So the next game is the Bears at the Titans. And the Bears and the Titans are two fairly even teams. They've lost games against teams that are not too amazing, like the Titans last week to the Bengals, one of the shockers of last week. But the Bears also lost a game to the Rams, which are more evenly matched than the Bengals, but it was a winnable game for the Bears, and they still lost. But I think I'm going to have to go with Tennessee winning here. They're going to be pissed coming off these two losses against the Steelers and then the Bengals. They're going to need retribution, so I think they're going to take out the Bears here this week. So the next game is the Ravens at the Colts. These are two teams that if you had told me in the beginning of the season that in Week 9 that they'd have the same record, I would have thought you were a liar because I thought the Colts would be worse than the Ravens but still playoff material, and I thought the Ravens would be really good, but they're 5-2, which obviously still a good record, but it's not quite what I thought they'd be at. They lost to the Chiefs and the Steelers. I, even as a Steelers fan, thought they had a chance of beating us, we squeezed out a win there last week. So I think I'm definitely going to go with Baltimore here. Indianapolis is a good team. Do not get me wrong. If they pull off an upset, it would be awesome, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised because they are still a good football team. Philip Rivers is good, and their defense is still playing really well. But I just think the Ravens are going to end up going through because they were able to rush for so many yards against the best defense in the league and the Steelers. I just don't see Indianapolis being able to contain them. So this next game is the Panthers at the Chiefs. And so the interesting X factor about this game is the fact that the Panthers seem to be activating Christian McCaffrey as far as the rumors go. And that's very exciting. Personally, he's one of my favorite players just because of how good he is. He was the Panthers offense last year. They didn't have the best record, but he still had amazing stats. And so he's a huge part of that team. The fact that they've been able to win quite a few games without him is pretty impressive, and I think that really is why Teddy Bridgewater has been really underappreciated this year. He's being able to carry this team without Christian McCaffrey, who a lot of people thought was the only reason why they won any games last year. So I really appreciate what Bridgewater's been doing for the Panthers, but I just don't see them getting past Kansas City. So I have the Chiefs taking the win here. So this next game is between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings. I believe this is their second meeting this year. The Lions are doing better than expected. I didn't necessarily think they were going to have a losing record the whole season, but they're performing a little better than most people thought. But I still don't think they're going to beat Minnesota. They did beat the Packers last week. So I'm going to have Minnesota taking the win here. So the next game is the New York Giants at the Washington Football Team. Still can't get over how fucking weird that sounds. And Football Team beat the Dallas Cowboys last week. It was like something like 25-3. Very embarrassing for the Cowboys. But this one's hard to call. And you know what? I think I am going to go with Football Team here. The Giants are just very unimpressive. And I mean, hey, Football Team won a division game last week. Why not make it 2 in a row, you know? So the next game is another division game, but this time it's in the AFC South between the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. This one in particular is interesting because both teams are 1-6. Honestly, never thought the Texans would be 1-6 this year. I had them making playoffs. Doesn't look that way right about now. They'd have to win 9 straight to have a winning record, you know, capable of making playoffs in the AFC. It's interesting that the Texans are so bad this year. You know, J.J. Watt was vocal about how he isn't confident in the team and how he just wants, you know, people are bringing up that they're in a rebuild, and he was talking about how he doesn't want to be in a rebuild. He wants to win a championship. You know, whether that means they'll trade him in the offseason, I hope not, because, you know, they need him. They definitely need him. But if he were to get traded, I hope he would go to somewhere good, you know, somewhere where he could be utilized, you know. And it's not like he's not being utilized. He's still, you know, one of the best defensive players in the league, whether he's doing well this season or not. It's just, you know, he's tired of losing, and especially this year, they have a lot of talent. They're just not performing well. And, you know, you can't really blame him for being mad about that, especially since he's been playing as long as he has, and he's been winning Defensive Player of the Year awards and stuff, and just, he's been the best player on the team for about a decade now. And he's tired of losing and not making it past the first round or second round of the playoffs, so he just wants more out of the team. And there's, you know, can't really argue with that. I mean, I would too if I was in that position. So I definitely have the Texans winning here. The Jaguars are not very great, not as good as they looked like they were going to be after week 1. So yeah, the Texans winning there. So the next game is the Las Vegas Raiders at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers have not been able to win a game when they've been really close. It's kind of it's interesting because Justin Herbert's been playing really well, but he also hasn't been able to seal any games yet. And although I think the Raiders secondary will struggle against the good receivers for the Chargers, I still think the Raiders are going to win. I think they're going to outperform the Chargers in most facets of the game. So I definitely have the Raiders winning here and going on a little bit of a streak. We'll talk about that more in the coming weeks, but I have the Raiders going on a little bit of a streak here, and first starting with beating the Chargers. So this next game is the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Dallas Cowboys. This is an interesting game. You know, it's got a lot of history behind it between the two teams, but this is definitely not a normal game between these two. You have the dominant Steelers who are undefeated through 7 games, and then you have the Dallas Cowboys who are absolutely awful without Dak Prescott after his injury. You know, they weren't playing good with Andy Dalton, and then he got concussed. They tried playing with Ben DiNucci last week, and he was not good. And so now they have to start, you know, 2 quarterbacks, one of which had last played in the AAF, and the other one was on the practice squad for the Cowboys. So they're really limited with their options here, and I just, there is very little chance they get any sort of, you know, lead of any kind, you know, past the first quarter against the best defense in the league. I just don't see it happening. And especially with Zeke Elliott, you know, having a fumbling problem this year, I don't see this going very well for Dallas, and their defense is pretty terrible. I see the Steelers mowing them over, but, you know, it's not a game to take lightly. You know, the Dallas Cowboys are going to be pissed, players and coaches alike. But I still have the Steelers mowing them over here, probably by at least 2 or 3 scores. I think it's not going to be a very close game. But, yeah, you know, can't help but feel for the Cowboys a bit. You know, they're pretty anemic without the players that are injured. But, you know, the coaching and the players are not meshing well. And both sides have been vocal about that, and it's just something we got to watch in the next year, you know, into the offseason. Will Mike McCarthy be able to stay around, you know, or will he get fired after the year? Who knows? We'll have to see where that goes, but I definitely have the Steelers beating the Cowboys this week. So this next game is between the Miami Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals, and the Dolphins are an interesting team because they're on a bit more of a roll than anyone thought they would be on. You know, they beat the 49ers a couple weeks ago, and they beat the Rams last week. It was pretty crazy that they were able to squeeze those out. And the Rams had just a way better game, but they just couldn't score, and the Dolphins just took advantage of that. So Tua Tagovailoa in his first career start didn't look amazing on paper, but they still squeezed out a win there. And I don't see them doing this against the Cardinals. You know, they're playing all these teams from the NFC West in a row. And, you know, they pulled one on the Niners. They pulled one on the Rams. The Rams one was more shocking than the Niners one. But I just don't see Arizona losing here, especially since they just beat Seattle. I just see the Cardinals definitely getting the win here. And so now getting into the primetime game for Sunday night. It's the New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so this is a really interesting game because the huge story around this one is that it's Antonio Brown's first game back after the whole... I would say fiasco, but it's more than one. So if you don't know the story on Antonio Brown, definitely look it up. There was so much that went into that. You know, really made me lose respect for the guy. But, you know, he's back in the league, which I give him credit for. And according to some people, he seems like he's changed. You know, we'll have to see where that goes. You know, I don't know if I believe that necessarily. But it is really interesting to see him back on the field and with the Buccaneers. But I just think if his ego is what it was before, he's going to ruin that team's chances of making a Super Bowl run. Honestly, he's gonna divide the locker room. There's so many players on that team that are team players. You know, I feel like they're gonna get fed up with him if he's like how he used to be. He's always been about attention and stuff, you know, and he wants you to say what he wants to hear. And I just feel like the Bucs aren't gonna have that. You know, Bruce Arians, I feel like it wasn't his call in signing him because this past spring he said it wouldn't happen, and then it happened, and, you know, he sounded, you know, stern when he talked about if he doesn't want to be a team player, you know, he's not going to be on the team. You know, and I can't help but feel that the Tampa Bay front office went behind his back to sign him. But that's just my opinion. So we'll have to see what AB's impact is on the Buccaneers offense, especially this week. The Saints are on a bit of a roll after a weird, rocky start. And I think I have the Saints winning here. You know, the Buccaneers are on a 2-game win streak. I think maybe even 3 or 4. Not entirely sure off the top of my head. But I do remember the past 2 games they've had were pretty dominant wins. So they've been looking great. And you know, Antonio Brown, if he plays to form, is only going to help that. But I just can't help but feel like Antonio Brown, if he plays like that, he's going to be taking time away from one or both of the other 2 great receivers on that team, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So it's interesting. If Brown stays on the team, I'll be very surprised. I feel like this is just introducing him back into the league, you know, making teams confident that they can trust him. We'll have to see how the rest of the season goes, but for now, I have the Saints winning that game. And so getting into the Monday night games, the only one for this week, unlike the last couple weeks that have had reschedules. It's the New England Patriots at the New York Jets. Fairly simple here. Patriots, although they haven't looked good the past couple weeks, I have them taking the win here. The Jets are terrible. They are very, very bad. They have no wins. Very little upside. You know, Darnold doesn't look great. You know, I know he's not the only problem. Adam Gase needs to be fired. I cannot believe that Bill O'Brien and Dan Quinn both got fired before him. It's kind of absurd, but the fact that the Jets are holding on to him just kind of proves what kind of culture they have there. You know, that being non-existent. So I just think the Jets could seriously go 0-16. I wouldn't be too surprised. So I have the Patriots taking the win here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to drop a like and leave a comment down below. And as well as subscribe for future videos. You know, we'll have another one of these next week. And give me some feedback in the comments about what you think I should do in these videos. I'm taking that into account for this week. You'll see I've instituted some changes into this video. So, you know, give me feedback on that. You know, let me know what you think. And without any more rambling, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.